Hello, everyone. I'm Jill Menz. I'm the news editor at Phocuswright, and we are here today with Gillian, who is chairwoman of one of the biggest travel brands on the planet, Booking.com, which is based in the Netherlands. So, Gillian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you very much. So great to be here.
Yeah. Great. So, we have to start with what is this lucky number 7 that Kimberly referenced in the intro? What does that number mean to you in your career?
Oh, number 7. Yeah, that's the employee number I have at Booking.com. Number 7. So that's what number 7 means. The number in itself doesn't mean that much, but it does show how long I've been involved with this company.
Right. Yes, you're the 7th employer of Booking and still around, so that's impressive.
I know. Yeah.
So let's talk a bit about how you got to that number 7 employee at Booking. We just saw in that presentation that over 50% of women say bias among management is an obstacle on their way towards the top. And also it said over 70% of women cite absence of a leadership track. So for you, how did something like taking risks help you overcome the obstacles that you faced?
Yeah, I didn't have a very obvious career path, and that probably also helped me throughout my career. I think the first moment, which was quite crucial for me, was when I think I was 13 or 14 years old, when my parents had an exchange student in the house, and they said, well, why don't you go to the US and visit that family? And I've never been outside of Europe or close to the Netherlands camping. So for me, that was an enormous experience. And to meet another culture, to see how things are so different. And it could be little things, but that made me realize that travel is so powerful. It's powerful because travel shows you another perspective. It opens the world you live in, and also it creates memories of a lifetime. And then after that, I studied a lot and still went abroad to work, and mostly in hotels. So that's also how I got connected to doing more hotel management. And I actually kept working in hotels. I thought it was just a great industry, because if there's any industry where they truly think about the customer experience, it is travel, and in this aspect then hotels. And in my latest job, I was doing marketing and sales for a hotel chain. And that's where I really learned that finding a booking and accommodation and bringing customers through these doors of all these properties all around the world was very complicated. And at that time, when the internet got started, and I feel very old saying that, but at that time, people weren't sure, okay, is this going to work, etc. And but I really believed in that. And I think because of stepping outside of my comfort zone already so much, I really thought I need to give this a try. And so when Bookings.nl at that time came along, I thought I need to take this risk, right? And because I truly believed that this could change finding a booking and accommodation. So I went. I had a very successful job in marketing and sales, and I joined this startup, and that I haven't regretted since. And then the whole journey through Booking again. Also, it got me to where I am today by taking risks and learning new things and not be afraid. And it feels very uncomfortable at many times, I must say. Mm-hmm. But once you get through this, you learn, you grow. And then, I never expected I could become the CEO of a company like that, right? That was never my plan. But because pushing yourself, you see that you can actually accomplish more than you even think about.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice, to take those risks and see what comes from it.
Yes.
Great. So the topic of women's leadership and diversity and inclusion, we've been discussing this for a long time, but as Kimberly mentioned, it's really become of heightened importance over the past few months. Why does the travel industry need to be having conversations around that now? And how do we kind of keep that focus moving forward?
Yeah, I think any industry needs to have this conversation. I think if you look at all the statistics around these topics all around the world, it's going to take over 100 years to get to full inclusion. So I think that in itself shows that this topic is still so important, and it needs to be on top of the list every day, right, to make sure that we improve this faster. And I think the travel industry collectively recognizes, right, that this needs more attention, that we need more role models, that we need more diverse leadership teams. And I myself, and I know many others in the industry, haven't been very happy with the status quo. And I think 2020, you see that this status quo is really being challenged. And you see now that standing on the sideline and just watching is not good enough, right? So something really needs to happen. And that, I think, is really good that it gets that attention. Mm-hmm. And then if you think about focus, mm-hmm. I think only focusing on, you need to look outside your business as well. And I've learned that with booking as well. If you think about travel, and also travel more and more is done through technology, we need to think about how do we get more diversity into the STEM fields, for instance, and companies can really help with that. So I think that needs a focus. And then within the businesses, a huge focus is needed. If you think about, and these are just a few examples, conscious bias trainings, promotional processes, make sure there's equal pay, right? There's the mentorship programs, and I can go on and on, but that still needs a lot of focus even today. And and I think the discussions, and also what this organization is doing here today, is very important, because these are steps that will help to keep breaking down these barriers.
Yeah, it's absolutely important to keep having these conversations, and for everyone that's listening, for example, to take these back to their leadership and their organizations and hopefully share some of what they've learned today.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So we talk a bit about, the business case for diversity beyond just wanting to, do the right thing and have a diverse representation. What is the actual business case for companies to have diverse leadership and through all ranks of their business?
Yeah, and this is always my biggest surprise, because I think if you think about the business case, then many business cases, if there's a good ROI, companies put investments against it. And sometimes I ask businesses if I'm being asked to hold discussions or Q&As, and I ask them, how much do you invest in diversity, right? And it's still not a lot of money that they're actually investing to make these improvements. And that always surprises me, because even this point, even if you don't trust anything else around it, but this has been proven over and over again. There's many research that's being done that companies who have more diverse leaders actually have better business performances. So I always think, then, if there's one area where you need to make sure that you invest in, it's this. I think in travel, if you think about travel, and if you think about the customer base and how it's about crossing borders and learning new cultures, I think travel companies need to make sure they reflect that. And that's what I found always very important at booking, because you need to make sure that you understand your customer, right? And you need employees that actually match that. And then thirdly, a very important one, that's culture. You see that companies that are more diverse, they have a more collaborative, more open, more creative and more innovative culture. And I think that's the start, right? And I always say, it's not only about diversity. Diversity is actually only the numbers, right? And then you have inclusion, which still, it's a choice. People can choose to include somebody or not. But the most important part is belonging, right? And if you can create a culture where people truly feel that they belong, that's actually what you want as a business. So I think that's why the business case keeps being so important.
Right. Yeah, you mentioned the culture component. Can you talk about, the culture at Booking, and, how many women are, not necessarily how many, but, has Booking always had women in leadership positions? How's your organization done that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think Booking, if you look at diversity from the beginning, also I think because we started off in the Netherlands, and it's a shame we're not in Amsterdam. Otherwise, you could have seen that the Netherlands is a very small country. So we had to cross borders very early on, and I think that you see back in the culture of Booking since the start. Right, we have 140 nationalities working in Booking.com, and even if today not, but if we were in offices, then in one office because you would have 100 nationalities working together on a single day, right? So you see that is super powerful at Booking. But if you look at diversity from, for instance, women in leadership, you see that was not the case from the beginning. The beginning you saw was a lot of Dutch and mostly men, and that makes sense, right? It's a Dutch startup in that way. And I still remember at the beginning, and that was a long time ago, that somebody came up to me and she said, yeah, it is so great that we have you. She said, but then I look below and I don't see any role models or other women in certain levels that are actually proceeding. And that's what made me realize, okay, this needs a lot of attention, and it takes time. You need to build that bottom up. And that's also the moment that we seriously started working on making sure that we make these changes. Today we have 30% of women in leadership. It's still a number that should go up, but it takes time, right? You cannot change that overnight.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So with the travel brands kind of maybe addressing this in a very real way, maybe for the first time, and women looking to advance their careers, what barriers still exist for them? You mentioned Booking took the initiative to do something about it, but what else is still that barrier blocking someone from getting up the corporate ladder?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of barriers, and I think we can spend the rest of this session talking about all the barriers that are out there. And what I always say, there's two elements that I find super crucial to make sure you understand these barriers, right? Because everybody here might have different barriers. So it's important to understand what are the barriers in my area or in my company. And I think the one element is data. I've learned also at Booking that you need to look in every corner of your company at data to make sure where do you see actually people get stuck. And then you can also take actions on these specific fields, and it starts with recruitment, through promotional processes and etc. Training, make sure that you develop more diverse leaders, etc. And the second part is that leaders are really accessible. Because if leaders are accessible, we can hold them accountable as well. And also you see them more involved in basically the day-to-day work that needs to be done to break down these barriers. Mm-hmm. And these two fields are super crucial, I think, to make sure that companies make these improvements.
Right, yeah. That kind of leads me to my next question, which is, what is the responsibility of men in pushing this agenda and getting involved? So many people feel that it falls on their shoulders when they're the ones trying to do it. So what can men do to help this?
Yeah, I think any stakeholder needs to do a lot. So it's not only men, but for sure men need to help as well. And I just saw the slide on the mentors for Phocuswright. You also saw one man, which is good, right? But you need more men that do mentorships. And I think this is a step that men can take, right, to start mentoring other women. Because if you do that, you also learn a lot more what's happening, and also learn a lot more as what needs to be done. So to actually create a more diverse workforce and to create more diverse leaders. So I think that for me would be super important for the step that men need to start doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to pivot a bit to looking at startups, the type of company Booking once was way back when you were the seventh employee. But, why is diversity and inclusion important for a startup from a very early stage for them? How does that help inform their culture, and how should they really be thinking about that?
Yeah, no, it's super important. And I think as a startup, you really have a choice to basically already create this culture from the beginning. Mm-hmm. So it's very important, even though you might think I'm too small to really be busy with these kind of topics. I do think it's crucial for the company that you want to be. And I think nowadays you see that also the employee base is very critical. They expect that leaders think about this, right? They expect that companies are working on this. So it's very important, even if you want to attract talent, they want to see this back in businesses, but for sure also in startups. So for me, it's a unique opportunity to do this right from the start.
Right, yeah. We touched a bit earlier on this, but can you talk a little bit more about the importance of education from an early age, as well as mentorships, and perhaps how people can start to seek out a mentor or seek out a group or whatever they might need to help advance their career a little bit?
Yeah, I always say that every career path is different, right? So there's no one size fits all. For me, internships have been crucial, right? If you think about that, really gave me an opportunity to have experiences that I otherwise wouldn't have. So I always think it's a very important aspect. Education is crucial, right? Especially if you think about women in technology, which nowadays is the future, where also when you see there really is an underrepresentation of women. So that's also why Booking decided to really support scholarships for women in STEM fields, and we do that all over the world. So we do that with universities in the US, in Europe, but also in India, for instance. And that has been very positive, and that actually it takes down barriers for women to start studying these type of topics. And it's only a little bit in a large arena, but still, if more companies would think about that, I think it would make a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Great. All right. Well, we did get one question from the audience here that I am going to read because it's a good question. So how do you ensure diversity in a company like Booking.com? And could you please give a few examples of concrete measures?
Yes. Well, yeah, there's a lot of things that we have been doing at Booking.com. And there's always little examples. I always say that you see back in, if you think about diversity, even in interview processes, right? You see that if you don't have a diverse interview panel, for instance, that already can be a challenge if you don't have a diverse candidate mix from the start. Even if you think about where candidates are coming into interview, right? What are they seeing, right? So there's so many aspects that are so super important. And then mentorship programs, role models. And we started off the Tech Playmaker Awards, for instance, because we saw through research that there's such a lack of role models. And internally, we started with these Playmaker Awards to really recognize women from any layer, right, that do amazing work. And that is so super positive. And we do that also outside of Booking. But that's an example of something that we have done. But mentorship programs we have specific leadership programs for women as well. But yeah, there's lots of things that are happening.
Yeah. Would you advise a travel brand to bring in outside consultants and outside help? Did Booking bring in outside help for what you've done, or how did you advise travel brands to go about starting a more robust diversity and inclusion program?
Yeah, we never did that with a consultancy. I don't know. I don't have that experience how that would be, but I think it's always very hard, right? If it's close to culture, then I think you almost need to be so much involved yourself. And I think you cannot have somebody else come in. And I find that always very hard around these topics, because it starts first with, and I've been doing lots of roundtables to listen to what's happening, right? And then you also hear people where they get stuck, right? Or even if you see that there's sexual harassment or things that are happening, right? And it's good that you create an open culture where people can just speak up, right? Because that, I think, is number one. But for me, I wouldn't know if that would be a good thing to do or not.
Okay, great. Well, we are coming up on time here. Is there anything else you want to leave the audience with today?
Yeah, well, always. I think if I want to just conclude from what we've been talking about, I think one is take risks, right? Don't be afraid. Step out of your comfort zone, which I always want to push. Secondly, it's very important what you say, but also how you act, right? I think everybody is a role model, so think about that. And so I think, that's something that I would like to say at the end. And make sure you're accessible.
Great. Great. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time with us today. I really appreciate it. And this was a great discussion. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.